Barbie's job, but she couldn't be here tonight. So I'm doing it. I'm Megan, introducing Trinity and her beautiful solo exhibit here at MoonRise, Fervid Wonder. Trinity has been showing at MoonRise for a couple years, since 2021, I believe, right?
I think so.
So we're always happy to see her new work, and we're happy that she shows here, and I'll just let her talk about her stuff.
Thanks. So we're going to attempt to go off with no cards, an attempt to not ramble, but we'll see. So like Megan said, my name is Trinity Noblecameron, and I've been blessed to be part of some of the group shows and part of the regular gallery here at MoonRise. So I actually got my BFA in graphic design from UNO, and I've kind of always used art as a hobby. I enjoy experimenting and exploring with different materials and mediums and textures. And it's always kind of been an outlet. So when I went into graphic design, I kind of went into the business side of art. But during school, I really fell in love with the ceramics and the sculpture, and so I started showing in galleries around Omaha, at the UNO Art Gallery, and at a couple places around. And then I graduated, and that kind of stopped. And then a couple years ago, I was strongly encouraged by my husband that I either needed to start showing and selling my work, or I needed to stop producing. So I've kind of always hoarded my art because I put a little bit of soul into each little piece, and often, so there's that sentimental attachment, but also as soon as you put something out there, it's no longer just yours, and it's open for interpretation, and yeah, so I, with my work, like to focus on kind of communication for the majority of things. So I often say that without communication, communication often leads to change. And the biggest importance is, in order to communicate with others, you have to communicate with yourself. You have to understand yourself. So either the choices you've made or are actively making, you have to understand your emotional state of why you do the things that you do. So art for me often leads to a realization where there's many a times I've stepped back from a piece and gone, oh, shit, that's what I've been struggling with lately, or problem solving, or anxiety inducing, or whatever it may be. So this show in particular has been full of a lot of personal, professional variety of growth for me. And because of a certain global event, I'm spending a lot of time with just myself, and I had to really develop a relationship with me as an individual to avoid going crazy. So I tend to focus on abstract forms. I've always found a calm in nature, so waves or clouds or the night sky, or whatever it is. If I'm dealing with something, I will often stare at one of those, and it becomes almost an abstract background for focusing on without focusing on while I'm focusing on my problem. So through that, I've used art as a way to both seize and release control. So as many artists know, sometimes materials don't do what you want them to do. I work sometimes with watercolor and sometimes with ceramics. And sometimes things dry not the way you anticipated, or you take a ceramic piece out of the kiln and it looks like baby poop. Those aren't in the show, but it's happened. So I like to work with different textures, and sometimes I'm impatient and those textures are very flat, and sometimes those are days of late nights or early mornings, or late nights and early mornings of developing highly layered textures where I've had to take a step back, look at it, plan more, and even if I have a plan, I still can't overthink because of that way that these materials are malleable. A lot of the shapes behind me are very organic and fluid, and these are natural to like my hand and sketches, and they're supposed to evoke either smoke or waves or ripples or a nebula, or even in some cases very ionic forms. But I've found a way to anchor myself in lines and color and dabs of paint. So as far as the interpretation of the pieces, I've focused a lot on the why, the reason behind things, the connection, and the process and the realization that can happen when you interact with something. For me, it's while I'm making it, and for like you guys, it's while you're viewing the piece. Remember when I said breathe? So, we as individuals are kind of always in our own little world, and for me, each of these pieces, like I said before, are like a little piece of my soul. So they're like their own little world that then gets to interact with my world, and then putting it outside my horde, others' world. So as you develop and grow, that's kind of where the title came from of Fervid Wonder, is because as you develop and grow, we kind of lose our wonder in the world. It's very often like childlike wonder, and this show's really, like, it's very important to continue to see the world as something wonderful and beautiful that you are constantly interacting with. Take a step outside and notice the light coming through the trees, or notice, water reflection, like light reflecting on water, something that like engages you and you find a calm in, because there's beauty in that, and there's beauty not only in the world but within ourselves, and through that, like, recognizing that we all are beautiful and wonderful, and we should acknowledge that more. So thank you for coming to see all of this, and I hope that you find some connection to either one of my pieces or one of the many in the rest of the gallery. And yeah, so
Thank you.
it's,
Thanks everyone for coming. Help yourself to refreshments, and yeah, feel free. Or does anybody have any questions for Trinity?
I'll take questions.
You can take questions.
There's a thematic quality to everything, as you've mentioned, and I wondered if did all this work happen in the last 3 years?
So a couple of the pieces I produced before we kind of developed the show, and when Megan asked if I wanted to do a solo show, We actually decided that in July. So the majority of the pieces have been developed since July. I think that one and then the triptych over there are kind of the only pieces that were done before that. So these are kind of the forms that I've always, like I've started sketching a lot, but yeah, for the most part, they were developed since like July.
Okay.
So
So you haven't always gone toward this form in your life, or have you?
I've used it a lot, but as far as like what's in the show, those are the only works from before July.
Okay.
They kind of really developed during that pandemic of like, I needed something that was fluid and abstract that could be surprising when it came out, that I used it to, because I used it to problem solve and to like work through like emotions or understanding something. It's a very like natural form, and so for the most part that form took shape during then, but I've noticed a couple of like past pieces as we were like pulling things out to put in the show of like, oh, that's kind of where those connect.